Welcome back. Today we'll be talking a bit about characters and characterization. Character is another tool in the author's toolbox, and one you really should not underestimate. The question on this slide is, how do we actually get to know our characters? What is it that the author does to help us understand what they are like? Think about it for just an instant. There are actually a number of ways in which authors can do this. Characterization is the way in which a character is presented, but it's part, and you should never forget that, it's all part of a plan of the author. What does the author want? Well, we have two major ways of distinguishing between characterization. One of them is called direct, and the other one is called indirect. What happens in direct characterization is that the author actually tells us what a character is like. An author could say he or she was lazy, or ambitious, or stupid, or maybe even ugly. Indirect characterization, of course, is much more interesting. It's where somehow the character gives him or herself away. So how can they do this? Well, there are several ways. A character can give himself away by the choices he or she makes, by the things he or she says, what he or she does, perhaps also what they look like. I think we can all draw some conclusions from this image about what this character might be like. To begin with, there's the distinction between the protagonist versus the antagonist. The protagonist really means that it's the main character of our story. This carries no value judgment. It simply means that he's the main character. The antagonist is whatever it is that the protagonist has to fight against, has to somehow combat. The protagonist, for example, in this story is this old man in the snow. It's a story by Jack London. In this story by Jack London, this old man has to fight against the cold. So in this case, the cold is the antagonist in the story. It doesn't have to be a character. It can be something else. It can also be fate, for example. The antagonist is whatever the protagonist has to fight against. Now make sure that you do not confuse that with this term, the anti-hero. The anti-hero, once again, no value judgment, tends to be a character who is central in a story, but who is really very unheroic according to traditional ideas. He is not courageous. He is not physically strong like Batman. He does perhaps not have fortitude. The man in the image here is a good example. This is Billy Pilgrim from Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, and he is extremely unheroic, yet he is the protagonist of the story. We find many such examples also in the media, but an anti-hero could, for example, be some kind of a noble criminal like Robin Hood, or could be a brilliant, grumpy, drug-addicted doctor like House in the television series. These are also main characters, but they are distinctly unheroic according to traditional values. Another distinction we should make is between round and flat characters and static versus dynamic characters. This character here is from Out of Africa. In the film Out of Africa, we run into this man. He is Karen Blixen's husband, who is both a weak and unfaithful husband, but at the same time a very compassionate, lovable, and ultimately even very brave man. So he is a round character because he has complexity. He has not just one character trait, like being unfaithful. He has lots of different character traits, like a real human being. A flat character tends to represent only one characteristic. Sometimes the narrator will actually use such one-dimensional characters in order to make the others come out better. So an author actually can choose to use flat characters as foils, as the different one from the main complex character. Static versus dynamic is another term that you should know. Static characters are characters that do not change in the course of the story. They do not learn anything. They are not different people at the end of the story. A dynamic character, on the contrary, learns something, changes, is a changed human being because of something that has occurred in the story. So much for character. I'll see you next time.